She spent 7 years convincing herself he was dead to her. Then he walked through those doors in a black suit, calm as a man who had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. And her 6-year-old daughter looked up at him and said, "You have the same eyes as me." The room didn't stop. The music kept playing. Nobody else heard it, but Amara Vale heard it like a gunshot. If you've ever loved someone who disappeared without a word, stay until the end. Drop your city in the comments. Let me see how far this story travels. The morning of her brother's wedding, Amara Vale ironed the same section of her dress 3 times without realizing it. She stood in the small bathroom of the hotel suite her brother had booked for the family, steam rising from the iron, her reflection fractured across 2 mirrors positioned at wrong angles to each other. She looked tired, not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind that settles into the bones and stops asking for permission. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes were doing that thing they did when she was preparing for something she couldn't name. She told herself it was just nerves about the ceremony. She was good at lying to herself. She'd had 7 years of practice. "Mama." A small hand appeared around the bathroom door frame. "Zoe says I can't wear my shoes inside the suite because the carpet is white." Amara set the iron down. "Zoe's right. But my shoes are clean." Zoe's still right. Her daughter, 6 years old, gap-toothed, wearing a flower girl dress that had already collected a mysterious stain near the hem, appeared fully in the doorway and fixed her with the kind of stare that made Amara feel like she was the child being managed. Her name was Lily. She had Amara's stubborn jaw and a pair of dark, heavy-lidded eyes that had always belonged to someone else entirely, someone Amara had spent 6 years training herself not to think about. "You ironed that part already," Lily said. "I know. You ironed it 3 times. "Thank you, Lily. You're doing the thing where you're nervous, but you don't want to say you're nervous." Amara picked up the dress and turned off the iron. "Go find your flower basket." Lily disappeared. Amara pressed the dress against her chest and stared at her own reflection. The woman looking back at her had a law degree from Georgetown, a partnership track at one of the most competitive firms in the city, a daughter she had raised without asking a single person for help, and a scar along the inside of her left wrist from a car accident she'd survived alone in the middle of a winter night 3 years ago when Lily was in the back seat screaming her name. She had survived everything alone. She was good at it by now. She just needed to survive this wedding. The ceremony was held in a converted estate outside the city, all stone arches and ivy, and the kind of manicured grounds that suggested old money without announcing it. Her brother Marcus had done well for himself, marrying into a family that collected properties the way other people collected debt. Amara liked his fiancée, Danny, genuinely liked her, which made it easier to smile through the preparations without the smile feeling hollow. She took her seat in the 3rd row. Lily sat beside her, clutching her flower basket with both hands, already vibrating with the barely contained energy of a child who had been told to sit still for 45 minutes and found this to be an act of cruelty. The music started. The procession began. Amara watched the bridesmaids file down the aisle, watched the groomsmen take their places at the front. She watched Marcus appear at the altar, hands clasped, visibly trying not to cry. She felt the tightness in her chest loosen slightly. He deserved this. Her brother had spent most of his 20s running from good things, and he'd finally stopped running. She admired that, even if she didn't quite understand the mechanism by which a person simply decided to stop. Then the best man walked to the front, and the air went out of the room. Not for anyone else. The string quartet kept playing. The guests kept rustling their programs and adjusting their hats. Danny's grandmother in the front row dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. The world kept moving at its ordinary speed. But for Amara, something slammed to a complete stop. She had not seen Cassian Voss in 7 years. She had not heard his voice, not received a single word from him. Not a message, not a letter, not an explanation. He had walked out of her life with the completeness of a man who had planned the exit carefully, and he had not looked back. She knew this because she had watched for it. For years she had watched for it. He stood at the altar in a black suit that fit him the way expensive things fit people who have worn expensive things long enough that they stop noticing. He was broader than she remembered. There were lines at the corners of his eyes now. His hair was shorter. He held himself differently. Not with the coiled, half-restrained energy she remembered, but with something more controlled, deliberate. like a man who had learned to take up exactly as much space as he intended and not a fraction more. He was looking directly at her. He had been looking at her since the moment he appeared, and she understood with a cold, sickening clarity that this was not an accident. He knew she would be here. He had always known she would be here. Lily tugged her sleeve. "Mama, that man is staring at us." "I know, baby. Do you know him?" A pause so small it was almost nothing. "A long time ago." "He looks sad." Amara didn't answer that. She fixed her gaze on Marcus at the altar. Her brother, her anchor. The reason she was sitting in this particular chair, in this particular room, on this particular day that had just inverted itself completely. And she breathed. She breathed the way she'd learned to breathe in the car after accidents, in depositions when opposing counsel tried to rattle her, in hospital waiting rooms at 3 a.m. Slow and deliberate and without giving anyone the satisfaction of knowing she was doing it. The ceremony lasted 40 minutes. She didn't hear a word of it. The reception was held in the estate's main hall, all warm candlelight and round tables draped in ivory linen. Amara found her assigned seat, settled Lily beside her with a plate of food and a strict instruction to stay within eye line, and spent the first 20 minutes talking to Marcus's college roommate about property litigation in a way that required enough concentration to keep her mind nailed in place. She did not look for Cassian. She was aware of him the way you're aware of a pressure change before a storm, not visually, but physically, somewhere below rational thought. He found her between the appetizer course and the first toast. She was standing near the edge of the hall, where the open doors led to a stone terrace, glass of water in her hand, watching Lily attempt to charm more food out of a passing waiter, with a level of audacity that was going to either land her in politics or significant trouble. Amara was almost smiling at it when she heard his voice behind her. "She looks like you." She didn't turn around immediately. She gave herself 3 full seconds, counted them, before she turned. Up close, he was worse. That was the only word for it. He was worse because he was real in a way that photographs in her memory had stopped being, because standing 4 feet from her was the actual weight and dimension of a man she had spent years compressing into something manageable, and manageable was not what he was. "Cassian." Her voice was even. She was proud of it. "Amara." The way he said her name. She hated that. She had not been prepared for the specific way he would say her name. "You should have warned me," she said. "You wouldn't have come." "That's not an answer. It's an honest one." She looked at him steadily. "What do you want?" "To talk. In 7 years you had a lot of opportunities to talk." She took a sip of her water. "You chose not to." Something moved across his face. Not guilt exactly. Something heavier than guilt. Something that had been sitting in him long enough to calcify. "I know. So I'm here now." "That's not good enough." "I know that too." There was a silence between them that had texture. All those years of not talking sitting in the air between them, not as dramatic void, but as ordinary weight. The sound of the string quartet drifted from somewhere inside. A child laughed. Not Lily, some other child, but Amara reflexively glanced toward her daughter anyway. Cassian followed her gaze. He looked at Lily for a long moment. Something in his face went very still. Amara felt the shift. Felt it like weather. "She's 6, Amara said, and her voice was quiet and very precise. A preemptive warning. A wall going up. Cassian turned back to her. His jaw was tight. His eyes had changed. "Amara." "Not here," she said. "Not tonight." "When?" "I don't know. Maybe never." She stepped back. "Enjoy the reception, Cassian." She walked away from him. She walked at a normal pace, normal stride. Nothing that would read as retreat to anyone watching. She collected Lily's hand from where her daughter was still negotiating with the waiter. Successfully, it turned out. The child had acquired a second dessert, and she steered them both toward a table in the far corner and sat down. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs and waited for them to stop. The first toast was Marcus's new father-in-law, a long-winded man who loved metaphors about sailing. The second was Danny's maid of honor, brief and funny and visibly relieved when the laughter landed. The third was Cassian. He stood at the front of the room with the microphone, and he talked about Marcus, about loyalty, about the specific kind of person who shows up when things are difficult and asks nothing in return. He was good at it. His voice was measured, warm, in a controlled way, and the room responded to it. He made Marcus laugh and Danny cry in the good way, and the assembled guests relax into their chairs. Amara watched from across the room. She had known him when he was 26. She had known him in the middle of the night when the control slipped and the real person showed through. She had known his hands and his voice and the weight of him in a dark room and the particular way he'd looked at her when he thought she was asleep. Like she was something he was terrified of losing. He had looked like that again tonight, on the terrace, when he'd seen Lily. She pressed her knuckle hard against her mouth and stared at the tablecloth. "Mama!" Lily was pulling at her arm again. "That man is coming over." Amara looked up. Cassian was crossing the room toward them with 2 glasses of something. Juice, she realized, as he got closer, not champagne. He'd brought juice for a child he did not know was his. He moved like he had rights he hadn't been granted yet. Amara stood. "I asked you not to." "She introduced herself to me," Cassian said quietly. "On the way back from the bathroom. I didn't seek her out." Amara looked at Lily, who had the expression of someone who had made a perfectly reasonable decision and saw no reason to apologize for it. "He has nice shoes," Lily offered. "Lily." "They're very shiny." Cassian crouched down to her daughter's height. It was a careful movement, deliberate. The movement of a man trying very hard not to startle something. He held out the juice glass. Lily took it without ceremony. "I'm Cassian," he said. "I'm Lily." She regarded him with the flat, unimpressed assessment that 6-year-olds apply to everyone until proven worthy. "You look like you're from somewhere far away." "Korea," he said. "Originally." "I've never been there." She took a sip of juice. "My mom says I have her eyes, but I don't think that's true. My eyes are darker." She looked at him. "Yours are dark like mine." The world did not stop. The music kept playing. Somewhere behind them, someone was clinking a fork against a glass, calling for another toast. But Cassian went very still. He held it together. Amara watched him hold it together by sheer force of something that lived deeper than composure. And he said, with a voice that barely showed the fracture, "You're right, they're a similar color." "Weird," said Lily, already losing interest, reaching for her dessert. Cassian rose to his feet slowly. He turned to face Amara. His eyes were wet. He was not going to cry. She could see him refusing to cry in real time, the muscles of his jaw working, but his eyes were wet, and she had not been prepared for that either. She had prepared for manipulation, for charm, for practiced remorse. She had not prepared for this. "I didn't know," he said. His voice was barely above the noise of the room. "Amara, I need you to know that I didn't—" "Stop." She moved between him and Lily. The instinct was animal, immediate. Not here, not in front of her. "When you left," he said, and his voice cracked on the single syllable and then held. "You were—" "I said stop." She looked him in the eye. "If you have any respect for me at all, you will stop right now." He stopped. They stood there, 18 inches of wedding air between them, and the weight of 6 years and 9 months pressed against both sides of that distance, like something that had been kept in a box too long. Cassian looked at his daughter one more time. Then he looked at Amara. "Tonight," he said. "After the reception. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to feel anything. I'm asking you for 20 minutes. She didn't answer. He turned and walked away. Lily looked up at her mother. "He forgot his juice glass," she said. Amara looked down at her daughter. This small, real, irreducible person she had built a life around and through and for, and the love she felt was so large it was almost indistinguishable from pain. "Finish your dessert," she said. Lily complied, and somewhere in the warm, crowded room, a man who had vanished 7 years ago was sitting at a table with his hands pressed flat on a white cloth, staring at the place where a little girl with his eyes was eating chocolate cake and swinging her feet above the floor. Amara knew she was going to give him the 20 minutes. She hated herself a little for knowing it so soon, later, after the toasts, after the first dance, after Marcus caught her eye across the room and she shook her head slightly so he would know not to ask questions yet. She found Cassian on the terrace. He was standing with his back to the door looking out at the dark grounds, a glass of something untouched in his hand. She stopped beside him, not close, Not the way they used to stand. 20 minutes, she said. He turned. Thank you. Don't thank me. Talk. He set the glass on the stone railing. He didn't look at it. He looked at her. The night I left, he said, I got a call from my father's people. There had been a move against him, a challenge, inside the organization. He was consolidating, eliminating anything that could be used against him. He paused. You were on a list, Amara. You and Marcus. People who mattered to me. My father knew about us. I don't know how long he'd known, and he made it clear that if I tried to contact you, if I tried to warn you, if I did anything other than disappear and stay disappeared, he'd have us hurt, she said. Killed, Cassian said. He wasn't imprecise about things. The word landed without drama. That was the worst part. He said it the way you say a word you've had to say so many times it loses its full weight, the way doctors say terminal and lawyers say liable, and the flatness of it was more convincing than any emotion would have been. You could have found a way, she said. People find ways. I know. You could have. I know, Amara. His voice was steady. I've had 7 years to build the argument you're making right now, and I know every version of it, and you're right about all of it. I am not here to tell you I made the right choice. I'm here because I have to tell you what happened and then live with what you do with it. She turned to face him fully. I was pregnant when you left. She watched it hit him. She had wondered over the years what this conversation would look like. Had imagined his reaction in 100 different ways, had sometimes imagined it coldly and sometimes with a cruelty she was not proud of. She had not imagined this. The way a person looks when something restructures their understanding of the past 6 years in real time. Not shock exactly, beyond shock, into a place where shock has burned itself out. And what's left is just the bare fact of damage done. I know, he said. She went cold. What? I found out 14 months ago. A photograph. Through someone I still had connections with, someone who had no idea what they were showing me. He pressed his knuckle to his mouth. Put it down. I saw Lily, and I knew. You've known for 14 months. Yes. And you? She stopped. Started again. You've been watching. From a distance. I had to be sure it was safe to come back. My father died 8 months ago. The organization took another 6 months to fully dismantle. He looked at her steadily. I didn't come back until I was certain there was nothing left that could touch you. Amara stared at him. In another story, this would be the moment where something softened, where the accumulated weight of his reason settled into something that resembled, if not forgiveness, then at least understanding. But she had raised a child alone. She had worked through a miscarriage scare at 11 weeks when she thought she might lose Lily too. She had driven herself to the emergency room in the middle of the night when Lily had a febrile seizure at 2 years old and sat in a plastic chair alone for 4 hours waiting to hear that her daughter was going to be fine. She had rebuilt everything, every piece of her life, from a foundation that had been pulled out from under her without warning. And he had known for 14 months. You don't get to decide when it's safe, she said. Her voice was shaking now, and she let it shake because she was done performing steadiness for his benefit. You don't get to sit somewhere far away and decide the timing while I'm... She stopped, breathed. You had 14 months, Cassian. You let her have 14 more months without knowing her father existed. I know. Stop saying that. I don't know what else to say. Then don't say anything. She gripped the stone railing. The night air was cold and she hadn't brought a wrap, and she was not going back inside yet. Tell me why I shouldn't end this conversation right now and take my daughter home. He reached into his jacket. He produced a small velvet box. Amara's jaw tightened. If that is a ring, it isn't. He held it out. After a moment, she took it. She opened it. Inside was a pressed flower, dried and preserved behind a small square of glass, the petals still holding the ghost of their original color. She recognized it. The knowledge arrived with the force of something she had sealed away and forgotten, cracking the seal. 7 years ago, a single dried flower had appeared in her mailbox. No note, no name. She had known it was from him, had known it in the wordless way you know certain things, but she had never been able to confirm it. She had thrown it away 6 months after he disappeared, because keeping it had started to feel like keeping an open wound. He had sent it. Of course he had. He had stood somewhere far away where it was not safe to speak, and he had found the smallest possible way to say something, and she had thrown it away because she hadn't known. She pressed the box closed. "There are documents underneath the flower," he said. "Property transfer. A house. Beachfront, outside the city. In Lily's name. I don't want your... It's not for you to want or not want. It's hers. Whatever happens tonight, whatever you decide, it belongs to her." He said it without softness, without manipulation, just the flat declarative weight of a man stating a fact. "I've had 7 years to prepare. I didn't know what I was preparing for. I just knew I had to be ready to give her something real if the day ever came." Amara looked at the box in her hands. The string quartet had shifted to something slower inside. Through the open doors, she could see couples on the dance floor, her brother among them, his forehead pressed to Danny's. The image was so ordinary and so complete that it felt almost cruel. 20 minutes is up," she said. He didn't move. "I know." She looked at him. "I haven't decided anything. I'm not asking you to. I need you to understand something." She held the velvet box against her chest. "I don't care how good your reasons were. I don't care how real the danger was. My daughter has 6 years of her life where her father didn't exist, and no explanation makes that smaller. Do you understand that?" "Yes," he said. "Do you actually understand it? Not as a concept, as a..." "Amara." His voice was rough. "I understand it. It is the one thing I am completely certain I will never be able to undo." She looked at him for a long moment. At the lines in his face and the wet in his eyes and the careful stillness of a man holding himself together because anything less would be self-indulgent in the face of what he'd done. Then, from inside the hall, there was a shriek of delighted laughter. They both turned. Lily had found the dance floor. She was in the middle of it, flower basket abandoned somewhere, both arms raised above her head, spinning in a circle with complete disregard for the actual rhythm of the music. Her dress was rumpled, and the stain on the hem had acquired a companion. She was laughing with her whole face and her whole body, and she looked like something that existed in total and unironic joy. Cassian made a sound, very quiet, not a word, just a sound. Amara looked at him and saw on his face the expression of a man who had spent 14 months looking at photographs and had just now, in this moment, understood what photographs cost him. She opened her mouth. She closed it. She looked at her daughter, and she looked at him, and the velvet box in her hands was pressed so hard against her chest she could feel her own heartbeat through it. "Stay," she said. "For the rest of the reception, don't approach her again. Don't try to talk to me again tonight. Just..." She exhaled. "Stay where I can see you." It was not forgiveness. It was not even close to forgiveness. But it was the door staying open another inch. And from the expression on Cassian Voss's face, she could see that he knew the difference. She told him to stay where she could see him. She didn't expect that to be the hardest thing she'd asked anyone to do in years. Not hard for him, but hard for her. Because staying where she could see him meant she had to see him. It meant watching Cassian Voss stand at the edge of the dance floor with a glass he never drank from, watching her daughter spin in circles to music that had nothing to do with spinning, and wearing an expression that Amara had no good place to put. She went back to her table. She sat down. She picked up her fork and put it down. The woman beside her, one of Danny's cousins, mid-30s, enthusiastic about centerpieces, said something about the floral arrangements. Amara said something back. She had no idea what. Her mouth was producing socially acceptable sounds, while the rest of her sat behind her sternum like a person watching a building burn from across the street, unable to look away and unable to do a single useful thing. Marcus appeared at her shoulder 20 minutes later. He pulled out the empty chair beside her and sat down without asking, which was his right as her brother and her oldest problem. "You want to tell me," he said quietly, "why Cassian Voss looks like someone told him the world ended and also showed him the one thing he'd die to protect?" "No." "Amara." "Not tonight, Marcus." He was quiet for a moment. The music shifted. Across the room, Lily had found a partner, one of the flower girls from Danny's side, a small red-headed child, and they were now engaged in a dance that bore no relationship to any established dance form and was entirely their own invention. "He's the best man," Marcus said. He's been my friend for 4 years. I didn't put it together until about an hour ago when I watched him watch Lily. He paused. Tell me I'm wrong. She didn't tell him he was wrong. Marcus exhaled slowly. It was the exhale of a man recalibrating an entire recent history. 4 years, he said. He's been in my life for 4 years, and he found out 14 months ago. Another silence. Longer. Does Lily? No. Are you going to? Marcus. She turned to look at her brother directly. His face, beloved and familiar and currently doing something complicated, looked back at her. Tonight is your wedding. I need you to go back to your wife and dance with her and not look at either of us for the rest of the night. I can't just... Yes, you can. You absolutely can. And you're going to. She put her hand briefly on his. I'm handling it. You always say that. And I'm always right. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he pressed his hand over hers, squeezed once, and stood. I'm calling you tomorrow. I know. Early. I know, Marcus. He went back to his wife. Amara watched him go, watched him fold back into the warmth of his own happiness, like a man returning to something he'd been briefly pulled from, and felt, not jealousy, that wasn't the right word, felt the specific ache of someone standing outside a lit window. She looked across the room. Cassian was looking at her. She looked away first. Lily fell asleep at 9:15, which was 45 minutes later than usual and represented a significant victory by her own assessment. She'd announced this victory to Amara in the elevator, listing her accomplishments for the evening. 2 desserts, 1 successful negotiation with the waiter, a dance competition she had won on points she herself had invented, and a conversation with a man who had very serious eyes but also laughed when I fell down, which means he's actually nice. Amara said nothing about the last item. She settled Lily into the hotel bed, shoes off, dress exchanged for pajamas, the whole operation accomplished with the practiced efficiency of a woman who had done it 10,000 times alone, and sat on the edge of the mattress for longer than she needed to. She watched her daughter sleep. The sound of small breathing in a quiet room, the particular peace of a child who had not yet been asked to carry anything heavier than a flower basket. She picked up her phone, put it down, picked it up again. She typed, Terrace, 20 minutes. She sent it to a number she had not deleted in 7 years and had spent 7 years not examining why. She sat with that for a moment. Then she kissed Lily's forehead, left the door between the bedroom and the suite sitting room open, and settled into a chair by the window to wait. He knocked at 11 minutes. She let him knock twice before she opened the door. Not as punishment, or maybe partially as punishment, but because she needed the extra seconds to make sure her face was doing what she wanted it to do. What she wanted it to do was nothing. She wanted it to do the lawyer face, the deposition face, the face that said, I have heard everything you're about to say, and I have already prepared my response, and you will find me completely unreadable. She opened the door. He was still in the suit jacket. He'd lost the tie somewhere. His collar was open, 2 buttons, and he looked like he'd spent the last 2 hours holding himself very still, and it had cost him something. She's asleep? He asked. Yes. I won't. He stopped. I know this isn't... He stopped again, pressed his hand against the doorframe. Can I come in? She stepped back. He came in and stood in the center of the sitting room with his hands at his sides, and she stood near the window with her arms crossed, and the suite hummed with the particular silence of 2 people who have run out of small talk and never really had it to begin with. Say it, she said. What? Whatever you came up here to say that you didn't say on the terrace. He looked at her. You know what I came to say. I want to hear you say it. He moved to the small couch along the wall and sat down. Not to make himself comfortable. She could see that, could see the rigidity of it, but because standing felt like something else, like an accusation, and he was trying to put himself below her eyeline. It was such a deliberate piece of body language that it almost undid her. I'm sorry, he said. For which part? All of it. That's not specific enough. His jaw tightened. Amara, no. She uncrossed her arms. You don't get to hand me a one-size apology and expect it to cover 6 years of raising a child alone. You want to apologize, you apologize for something specific. Pick one. There's plenty to choose from. He looked at the floor, then up at her. I'm sorry for the night I left, he said. I got the call and I packed a bag and I walked out and I didn't. He stopped. The muscle in his jaw worked. I stood outside your door for 11 minutes. I timed it. I stood there and I knew if I knocked, you'd let me in. And if you let me in, I wouldn't leave. And my father had already told me what would happen if I didn't leave. He paused. So I left. I didn't knock. And I'm sorry for those 11 minutes more than almost anything else. The room was very quiet. 11 minutes, she said. Yes. I was inside. Her voice was steady. She was going to keep her voice steady. I was inside and I didn't know you were there. I was probably sitting at the kitchen table. I used to sit at the kitchen table at night when I couldn't sleep. She looked at him. I sat there a lot after you left. He said nothing. There was nothing to say to that. I didn't know I was pregnant yet, she continued. I found out 3 weeks later. I sat at that same kitchen table when I took the test. Alone, she breathed. Every single significant moment after you left, I sat at that table alone. Do you understand what I'm describing to you? Yes. Then stop looking at me like I'm being unfair. I'm not. He caught himself. I don't think you're being unfair. You have an expression. It's not. He pressed his hand over his mouth briefly. Put it down. I'm not trying to defend myself. I told you on the terrace. I know what I did. I know what it cost. I'm not here to litigate my reasons. Then why are you here? Because she exists. His voice cracked at the end of it. Not dramatically. Just the clean structural crack of something under too much pressure. The kind of sound that happens before a person reasserts control. Because I looked at her tonight and she told me my eyes looked like hers, and I almost... He stopped, collected himself. She's real, Amara. I knew that intellectually, from photographs, from a distance. But she looked at me tonight like I was just a person at a wedding, just a man in nice shoes, and I was standing there knowing... He stopped again. Knowing what? She asked, and her voice was quieter now. Not softer, but quieter. Knowing that I missed 6 years. Not as an abstract figure, as actual days. She said she's never been to Korea. That's a thing she doesn't know because I wasn't there to show her. There are 1,000 things she doesn't know because I wasn't there, and each one of them is specific, and I can't... He pressed his elbows to his knees and looked at the floor. I can't make it abstract anymore. I tried. On the way up here, I tried to make it manageable, and it isn't. Amara stood by the window and said nothing. She had rehearsed a version of this conversation in her head over years, had cast herself in it as the unmovable one, the rightfully furious one, the woman with every moral high card in the deck. She was still that woman. She had earned that position through years of solo midnight fevers and solo parent-teacher conferences and solo everything. But she was also a person standing 4 feet from someone who was falling apart, and the specific nature of what he was falling apart over was her daughter. And something in her chest kept making unhelpful observations about that. She crossed the room and sat in the chair across from him. Not beside him. Across. What did you think was going to happen tonight? She asked. He looked up. I didn't let myself think past getting in the same room as you. That's not an answer. It's the honest one. You keep saying that, honest, like that's the whole requirement. It's what I have, he said. I can't give you back the time. I can't give Lily back 6 years of knowing her father. All I have is what's true and what I'm prepared to do differently. And what are you prepared to do differently? He was quiet for a moment. Everything. That's too big. I know. I'm starting there and I'll get more specific. He held her gaze. I'm not going back to Korea. I've closed everything there that needed closing. My father's organization is gone. Not dormant, not restructured, gone. I've spent the last 8 months making sure of that. He paused. I have a place 40 minutes from here. I've had it for 6 months. I bought it before I knew if you'd ever let me near either of you. She stared at him. You bought a house? Yes. 40 minutes away. Yes. And you just... She exhaled. You just sat in it for 6 months. I needed the situation to be safe before I could come to you. And when it was safe, I needed... He hesitated. I needed a plan that wasn't just showing up and hoping. This is your plan. Marcus's wedding was my plan. He owed me one, and He read her face. He didn't know why. I told him I needed to see an old friend. He didn't know it was you until tonight. Amara stood up. The movement was abrupt enough that Cassian tracked it the way you track sudden motion, alertly, carefully. She went to the window. The city spread out below in its ordinary nighttime arrangement, lights and traffic, and the complete indifference of everything that wasn't this room. You used my brother, she said. Yes. You orchestrated this entire... Yes. Because you knew I wouldn't answer your calls. You changed your number 3 times. He said it without accusation. I understood why. I just needed a way in that didn't require you to choose to let me in before you knew what I had to say. She pressed her fingers against the cold glass. You don't see anything wrong with that. I see everything wrong with it. I still would have done it. He stood. She heard him stand, heard the movement, the shift of weight, and her shoulders went up by reflex. Amara. He didn't move toward her. She could feel that he hadn't moved. You had every right to keep me out. You still do. But Lily... Don't. She turned from the window. Don't use her as a reason. She is the reason. She's a 6-year-old child who has never known she had a father, and that means you don't get to use her to justify what you want. She doesn't get a vote on whether you're forgiven because she doesn't know what she'd be forgiving. Her voice was shaking again. She was so tired of her voice shaking. She's 6, Cassian. She's 6 and she's happy, and she doesn't have a hole in her life where you're supposed to be because she's never known there was a hole. He said nothing. If I let you in, she said, and then you leave again. She stopped. I won't. You don't get to promise that. I know, but I'm promising it anyway. That's not how promises work. I know how promises work. Something shifted in his voice, the careful control of it developing edges. I also know that the alternative, standing outside again, not knocking, I know what that costs. I've been paying that bill for 7 years, and I'm not going to pay it anymore. He moved then, crossing the space between them until he was close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his face up close, not hidden anymore by distance or dim light or the performance of composure. I know I don't have the right to ask for trust. I know I have to earn it if it ever comes. I'm asking you to let me try. That's it. That's all I'm asking. But Amara looked at him. Up close, he was exhausted. She hadn't let herself see that on the terrace. He was exhausted, and he was holding himself together with something that looked less like discipline and more like desperation. And she knew with the bone-deep certainty of someone who had spent years being honest with herself because there was no one else to be honest with, that the desperation was real. That didn't make it enough. There are rules, she said. He waited. You don't talk to Lily about who you are until I say so. Not a word, not a hint, not an implication. She meets you as a friend of her uncle's, and that's all she knows until I decide otherwise. Okay. You don't make decisions about her without me. Not presents, not outings, not anything. You ask me first. Okay. If you miss one scheduled time, if you cancel once, if you're late once without a reason I consider valid, we stop. No second chances on that. She will not sit somewhere wondering where you are. I will not let her learn that. Her voice was flat and absolute and meant every word. You understand what I'm telling you? You're telling me that she's been protected from abandonment her whole life because you built the protection, and you will not let me dismantle it. Yes. I understand. Do you? Yes. He said it without flinching. I would agree to worse terms than these. Whatever you ask for, I will agree to, and then I will keep to it. She looked at him for a long moment. The sitting room hummed its quiet hum. From the bedroom, the soft rhythmic sound of Lily's breathing reached them both, and she watched Cassian's eyes shift briefly toward the open door, toward that sound, and come back. One chance, she said. I know. I mean it. I know you mean it. He held her gaze. I also know that you are the most rigidly honest person I have ever known, and that when you say one chance, you've already thought through exactly what it means, and you will enforce it. And I'm glad. I want you to enforce it. He paused. Because that's the only way I know this is real. She should have had more to say to that. She had prepared more. She had entire floors of argument still unspoken, months and years of documented evidence stacked and ready. but the sound of Lily breathing in the next room was doing something to her architecture. "Go," she said. "We're done for tonight." He nodded. He moved toward the door with the careful economy of a man who knows he's been given something breakable to hold and is determined not to drop it. He stopped with his hand on the door. "The house," he said. "The property documents. They're real. I'll have the paperwork sent to you this week. Your name on the cover letter, Lily's name on the deed, no conditions." "I told you I didn't want—" "It's not for you to want or not want, I told you." His hand was still on the door. "It's hers. Whatever you decide about me, whatever happens, that house is hers. I need you to know that at least one thing I prepared for her can't be taken back." She didn't answer. He opened the door. He was almost through it when she heard herself say, "Not planned, not strategic, just the bare fact of it surfacing despite every effort. She asked about you tonight, after you walked away the second time. She wanted to know if you were going to be at the breakfast tomorrow." He stopped. He didn't turn around. His hand on the door frame was very still. "What did you tell her?" he asked, and his voice was barely above the sound of the hallway. "I told her I didn't know." The silence stretched. "Will you be at the breakfast?" Amara asked, and hated that she'd asked, and asked it anyway. He turned then. His face was doing the thing again, the thing where the control was present, but the cost of the control was visible underneath it, like light through a crack. "Yes," he said, "if you'll allow it. I'll think about it." He looked at her for another moment. Then he nodded and walked out and pulled the door closed behind him with a quiet, deliberate click, the sound of a man who understood that slamming things was no longer available to him. Amara stood in the center of the sitting room. She stood there until she heard the elevator at the end of the hall open and close. Then she went to Lily's doorway and leaned against the frame and looked at her daughter sleeping, the small architecture of her under the hotel duvet, one arm flung out the way she always slept. In the morning, Lily would wake up and want pancakes and want to know what time the wedding people were eating breakfast, and Amara would have to have answers ready, and the answers she chose would determine the shape of everything that came after. She pressed her forehead against the doorframe. She had told him one chance. She had meant it. What she hadn't told him, what she would not tell him, not yet, maybe not ever, if she could hold the line, was that watching him look at Lily tonight had done something she could not fully account for. Not forgiveness, not even close to forgiveness, but something that lived in the same building as hope, on a different floor, behind a locked door she wasn't ready to open. She went to bed. She did not sleep for a long time, and 40 minutes away, in a house he had bought 6 months ago and barely lived in, Cassian Voss sat in the dark in a chair facing a window and held a velvet box he had not given her yet, the real one, the one that was not documents and was not a flower, and did not open it, and did not sleep either, and waited for morning to tell him what kind of man he was still allowed to become. The breakfast was at 9. He would be there, and she had not told him not to come. The breakfast was set in the hotel's garden terrace, the kind of setup that costs more than it looks. Linen tablecloths, fresh flowers, a buffet arranged with the deliberate casualness of things that required significant effort to appear effortless. Marcus and Danny's families occupied 3 long tables pushed together, and the noise of it was warm and overlapping and the specific kind of loud that means everyone present is genuinely happy to be there. Amara arrived at 8:52. Lily was already awake before 7, which was Lily's custom. She treated sleep as an inconvenient interruption to the business of existing and dispatched it as quickly as possible. She'd eaten half a granola bar from Amara's bag, changed her mind about her outfit twice, and arrived at the terrace with the energy of someone who had been fully operational for hours. Amara had spent those hours thinking. She had not resolved anything. She had simply thought until her thinking went flat, the way thinking does when it circles the same material too many times. By the time she dressed and steered Lily toward the elevator, she had arrived at a position that was less a decision than an armistice. She would see how the morning went, and she would not make anything worse, and she would keep her eyes open. She spotted Cassian at the far end of the joined tables before he saw her. He was already seated, coffee in front of him untouched, talking to one of Marcus's cousins with the controlled social ease of a man who has spent years operating in rooms where letting your attention show is a liability. He looked like he'd slept about as well as she had, which was to say, not well, but he was put together. Different clothes from the night before, a dark shirt with the sleeves pushed back, the jacket gone. He looked like someone who had prepared carefully and then tried to make the preparation invisible. He saw her when she was 4 tables away. Something in his face went very careful very quickly. He tracked Lily, one small glance, then back to Amara, and she could see him calculating the distance between what he wanted to do and what he was allowed to do and honoring the distance. She gave him a nod, small, non-committal. He gave her one back. They sat at opposite ends of the table. The morning would have been manageable if Marcus hadn't seated them next to each other for the formal family photographs after breakfast. She understood it was an accident. Marcus had handed the seating chart for photos to Danny's aunt, who didn't know anyone and had arranged people by approximate height. But understanding it didn't make standing 18 inches from Cassian in the garden's morning light any easier to negotiate. Lily stood in front of them. The photographer asked everyone to move together for the shot. Cassian moved left. Amara moved right. They both moved at the same time, which put them closer together than before. She could smell his jacket. She remembered the smell, which was a piece of information she did not need. Lily looked up at both of them and then back at the camera and smiled with the full-face commitment of a child who has been told to smile and considers this a reasonable request. The photographer took 6 shots. "Good, beautiful family," he said. Amara's jaw tightened. She felt rather than saw Cassian absorb the word, family, felt the slight stiffening of him beside her, the deliberate stillness of a person sitting with something that burns and refusing to move. "Not family," she said to the photographer, pleasantly. "Just guests." The photographer was already moving on. Lily had grabbed Amara's hand and was asking about second breakfast, which she had apparently decided was a concept that applied to her. Cassian said nothing. When Amara glanced at him, he was looking at the middle distance, jaw set, expression locked down. He caught her looking and looked back. "You didn't have to correct him," he said, quiet enough that only she could hear. "Yes, I did." Lily didn't hear it as anything. "I know." "Then, Cassian," she kept her voice level, "don't." He looked at her for a moment, then, "Okay." That single word, the restraint of it, the way he swallowed whatever came after it, landed somewhere she didn't want it to land. She took Lily to find second breakfast. She was standing at the buffet, loading a small plate with fruit for Lily, when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. She answered because she was a lawyer and unknown numbers sometimes mattered. "Ms. Vale." The voice was male, measured, with an accent she placed as Eastern European after 2 seconds. "My name is not important. What's important is that I know where you are this morning, and I know who you spent last evening speaking with." She went very still. Around her, the breakfast noise continued, silverware and conversation and a child somewhere asking to be excused. "I think you have the wrong number," she said. "Cassian Voss," the voice said. "You were on the hotel terrace with him until approximately 11:45. His suite is on the 9th floor. You're on the 7th. A pause. "Does that sound like the wrong number?" She put the plate down. Her hands were steady. Her hands were always steady when things became serious. That was the thing about her, the thing she'd discovered in her first year of law, that genuine threat had a clarifying effect, the same way a cold room makes a person more awake. "What do you want?" she asked. "To have a conversation with you before you make decisions you'll regret. Cassian has told you his version of certain events. There are aspects of those events he did not share with you. I'd like to fill in the gaps." Another pause. "In person. Alone. Today. There's a cafe 2 blocks from the hotel. Marlowe's. Noon. I'm not meeting a stranger at... Your daughter's name is Lily. She's 6. She was born on March 14th. She weighs approximately 42 pounds and she has a small scar on her right knee from a fall she took at a playground on Sutter Street 18 months ago." The voice was flat. Not threatening in tone, just informational, which was somehow worse. "I am not a threat to either of you. I am an inconvenience to Cassian Voss. Those are very different things. Be at Marlowe's at noon." The call ended. Amara stood at the buffet with her phone in her hand. Lily appeared beside her and reached for a strawberry without asking. Around them, the morning continued its ordinary operations. She put her phone in her pocket. She picked up the plate. She walked back to the table. She did not look at Cassian. She did not look at her phone. She ate breakfast with her daughter and answered Lily's questions about whether elephants could swim. They could, she confirmed. Lily found this deeply satisfying, and she sat with the fact of that phone call sitting in her chest like something she'd swallowed wrong. At 11:15, she told Lily she had a work call and settled her with Marcus's wife's younger sister, who was 22 and delighted by the prospect of entertaining a 6-year-old for an hour. She told no one else where she was going. Marlowe's was the kind of place that exists in every city, dim regardless of the hour, the smell of old coffee ground into the furniture, the kind of quiet that people go to when they need to have conversations that can't be overheard because the ambient noise covers everything. She arrived at 3 minutes to noon. The man was already there. He was in his 50s, compact, with close-cropped silver hair and the particular stillness of someone who has spent time in environments where stillness is a survival skill. He was drinking tea. He gestured to the chair across from him without standing. She sat. "You came alone," he said. "I came with a clear memory of your face," she said, "and an active record button on my phone. So talk." The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. "Cassian's father," he said, "was a man named Jan Voss. I worked for him for 11 years. I left when I understood the kind of man he was." "What kind of man was he?" "The kind who doesn't make threats," he said. "He makes arrangements. There's a difference. A threat implies the possibility of avoiding the outcome. An arrangement simply means the outcome has been scheduled." She watched him. "You're telling me Cassian's story was true. His father threatened me." "Jan Voss was aware of you from the 5th week of your relationship with Cassian. He had people watching his son for years. When Cassian began showing signs of attachment, significant enough to matter, Jan began contingency planning." He turned his teacup slightly. "But here's what Cassian did not tell you, Ms. Vale. Or perhaps what he chose not to know." She waited. "The threat to you was real," the man said, "but it was also designed. Jan wanted Cassian back in Korea, not because your relationship was a liability, but because he had a specific marriage arranged for his son, a consolidation, 2 families merging assets through a union. The woman's name was Seo Yeon Park. The marriage was planned for 14 months after Cassian returned." He paused. "Cassian complied. He went back. And 7 months after leaving you, Ms. Vale, he married her." The cafe noise continued. Amara sat very still. "He's been married," she said. Not a question. "Was married. Seo-yeon died 4 years ago. An illness. The marriage itself lasted 2 years before it became nominal. By all accounts, they lived separately within it." He set down his cup. "I'm not telling you this to be cruel. I'm telling you because the story Cassian is presenting to you, the man who sacrificed everything, who has spent 7 years in isolation preserving himself for the moment he could return, is incomplete. He did not spend 7 years alone. He spent 2 of those years married to another woman, and he never found a way to tell you that." She breathed in. She breathed out. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because I have a daughter," he said simply. "And I know what it looks like when a man edits the past to make himself into something a woman can forgive. Cassian is not a bad man, but he is a man who is very skilled at presenting the version of truth that serves his purpose." He reached into his jacket and produced a folded piece of paper, set it on the table in front of her. "Marriage certificate, date of issue, his name, her name. You can verify it independently if you choose." She looked at the paper. She did not touch it. "What do you want from this?" she asked. "Nothing," he said. "I want nothing from you. I owe Cassian a debt that I'm settling in an unusual way." He stood, put money on the table for the tea. "I could have settled it by saying nothing. Instead, I'm giving you the information you need to make a real decision rather than one based on a curated story." He looked at her directly. "Your daughter deserves a father who tells the whole truth, not just the parts of it that are easy." He left. Amara sat alone in the dim cafe with a folded piece of paper on the table in front of her, and the sounds of the ordinary world continued around her with complete indifference, and she sat with what she had just been handed and understood that everything she had decided last night had been constructed on ground that was not as solid as she'd believed. She picked up the paper. She unfolded it. The names were there, clear as anything. Cassian Jun Voss, Seo-yeon Park. A date, 14 months after he had walked out of her apartment. while she was 7 months pregnant and learning how to build a life from the wreckage he had left. She folded it back up, put it in her bag, stood, walked out into the afternoon light, which was doing the thing that afternoon light does in late autumn, coming in at an angle that makes everything look like the end of something. She was back at the hotel by 12:40. She did not go to the family gathering in the lounge. She went to the 9th floor. She knocked on his door with 3 knocks. Hard, deliberate, the kind that says this is not a social call. He answered quickly enough that she wondered if he'd been watching for her. He took one look at her face and stepped back from the door. She walked in. She turned around. Seoyeon Park, she said. The name landed on him like a physical object. She watched it land. Watched him go through something she could only describe as the specific collapse of a prepared architecture. The face of a man who had built careful walls and watched them come down too fast to respond to. He said nothing. "When were you going to tell me?" she asked. He moved to the window, his back to her. "How did you—" "It doesn't matter how." She kept her position near the door. "Were you going to tell me?" He turned around. "Yes." "When?" "When I had—" He stopped. "When you had enough goodwill built up that I might absorb it differently." Her voice was even. The lawyer voice. The voice that had survived worse rooms than this one. "When I'd already let you into Lily's life enough that the cost of losing you would make me more likely to forgive it." She looked at him steadily. "That's the calculus, isn't it?" "No." "Then what's the calculus?" There wasn't one. He moved away from the window. His hand went to the back of his neck, a gesture she remembered, the gesture he made when he was about to say something that cost him. There was no strategy. There was shame. That's the whole answer, Amara. I was ashamed, and I didn't know how to— You were ashamed. She let the word sit. You married another woman while I was pregnant with your child, and you were ashamed. My father arranged it. I didn't— I know your father arranged it. She took 3 steps toward him. I know you were under duress. I know the entire structure of your life at that time was controlled by a man who didn't understand the word no. I am accounting for all of that. She stopped, 4 feet from him, close enough to see everything his face was doing. And I'm telling you that none of that is why I'm standing here. I'm standing here because you looked me in the eye last night and you told me you were prepared. You told me you'd spent 7 years preparing. You told me you had come back with everything above the table. She paused. And you left out the part that mattered most. I know. Stop saying that. What do you want me to say? I want you to explain to me, she said, how a man who claims to be done with the edited version of truth edits the most significant part of the truth in the first conversation he has with the woman he claims to be trying to deserve. He looked at her. The composure was gone now, fully gone, and what was underneath it was not pretty and not calculated, and she believed it because of that. Because calculated men look controlled when their walls come down, and he did not look controlled. He looked like someone who had been hoping the question wouldn't come and had known all along that it would. Because I knew, he said, that if I told you, you would close the door, and I couldn't— He stopped. His voice had roughened past the point where smoothing it was possible. I couldn't close the door before you'd heard anything. I needed you to hear the truth of why I left first. I needed you to know that the leaving was about protecting you, not abandoning you. And then I was going to tell you. I was going to tell you all of it. When? Soon. That's not a time. I know it's not a time. I don't have a specific time. I had a sequence, and I hadn't gotten to a sequence. She said the word like it was something she'd found under a rock. You had a sequence. You prioritized which truths I received and in what order to manage my response. She looked at him. Cassian, that is exactly what a manipulative person does. I know how it sounds. Do you know how it is? Because it sounds the way it is. He pressed his hand flat against his sternum. She didn't know if it was a deliberate gesture or an involuntary one. The marriage was real in every legal sense and in no other sense. I want you to know that. I want it to mean something to you that I am telling you that, even if you have no reason to believe me right now. Tell me about her, Amara said. He blinked. What? Seoyeon. Tell me about her. He looked thrown. She let him be thrown. She needed to see what he did with it. He sat down on the edge of the bed. Not deliberately, just suddenly sitting. She was 28 when we married. She was quiet, very careful, the way people are when they've been taught that taking up space is a mistake. She didn't want the marriage any more than I did. He looked at the floor. We were polite to each other. We didn't hurt each other. When she got sick, I made sure she had everything she needed. When she died, He stopped. I felt the grief of watching someone die young who deserved to live longer. That was real. But I never pretended to her that it was something else. Amara watched him. Did she know about me? She asked. He looked up. Yes. You told her? She asked. In the second month, she could see that I had been somewhere else when she met me. She asked if there was someone. I told her there had been. I told her it was finished. He paused. I didn't tell her about Lily because I didn't know about Lily. But she knew I existed. Yes. Amara turned away from him. She went to the window the way she always went to windows when she needed a surface she could look at without it looking back. The city below was doing its afternoon business. Cars, people. The ordinary compression of lives happening simultaneously with no awareness of each other. I have a daughter, she said, who has never been lied to. I made that decision when she was born. I decided that she would grow up in a house where the truth was the baseline, even when the truth was difficult, because that's the only way a person learns to trust their own perception of the world. She turned around. And now I'm supposed to bring her father into her life. And her father is a man who, in the very first significant conversation we have, withholds information to manage my response. I know what that sounds like. It doesn't just sound like something, it is something. She picked up her bag from where she'd set it on the chair. Her hand was in the bag, closing around the folded piece of paper, but she didn't take it out. I need to think. Amara, I need to think. That means I need you to not be talking. He closed his mouth. She stood there for another moment. She was thinking about Lily, who at this moment was probably terrorizing Marcus's wife's younger sister with enthusiasm and gap-toothed charm. She was thinking about a kitchen table in an apartment she no longer lived in, and all the nights she had sat at it alone, and all the things she had built in the years since. She was thinking about a pressed flower in a velvet box and whether it was possible for an object to be simultaneously real and insufficient. She was thinking about a 6-year-old girl who slept with one arm flung out and who had said, with the casual certainty of a child stating a fact, that a stranger at a wedding had the same eyes as her. I have one question, she said. He waited. If the man who told me about the marriage, if he hadn't told me, were you going to tell me yourself? Actually going to. Not as a plan, not as a sequence. Were you? The silence was 3 seconds long. Honest people answer faster than that. She watched him understand that she knew what the 3 seconds meant, and she watched him decide not to lie about it anyway. I don't know, he said. I'd like to tell you yes. I can't tell you for certain. She nodded. She walked out. She walked down the hallway with her hand around the folded paper in her bag, and her chest doing something she refused to examine until she was somewhere private. She took the elevator down. She went to the room where Lily was drawing pictures with a woman she'd known for 4 hours, as though they were old collaborators. She sat down on the floor next to her daughter and looked at the drawing. A horse, possibly, or a very optimistic dog, and said nothing. Lily handed her a green crayon without looking up. You do the grass, she said. Amara took the crayon. She drew grass. Her hand was shaking so slightly that only she could feel it, and she drew grass anyway, slow even strokes, while her daughter narrated the ongoing drama of the horse or dog's journey through a landscape only Lily could fully see. And in the room upstairs, Cassian Voss sat on the edge of a hotel bed and looked at the space where she had been standing and understood with a clarity that arrives only when the last version of a story you've been telling yourself finally fails. That he had been so afraid of losing her again that he had made losing her again almost certain, and that this was not new information about the world. It was new information about himself. And the worst part, the part that sat in him like a coal, was that she had asked him one direct question, and he had given her the only honest answer he had. And the honest answer was, I don't know. And I don't know was the one answer that could not be survived. He reached into his jacket pocket. The second velvet box, the real one, the one that was not documents, was still there. He had been carrying it for 6 months. He had thought last night, standing on the terrace, that the moment was not right. He had been correct about that. He held it in his palm. He did not open it. Downstairs, Lily Vale was explaining to her mother that the animal in the drawing was definitely a horse, and that the very long neck was a stylistic choice, and Amara was saying yes, she could see that, and was drawing the most careful grass she had ever drawn in her life. And outside the hotel, the afternoon was doing what afternoons do, moving forward without asking permission from anyone inside it. And somewhere in the building, a door that had been opened one careful inch the night before was closing, and both of them could feel it, and neither of them knew yet whether the sound it was going to make was a click or a slam. Because the difference between those two sounds was the difference between something that could be reopened and something that could not, and the next move belonged to a man who had already used his best one and found it wasn't enough, and who was sitting in a room 9 floors up trying to figure out what a person does when honest is all they have left. And honest turned out to be, he came to find her at 4 in the afternoon. She was in the hotel garden, not the manicured part near the terrace where the wedding photos had been taken, but the back section where the landscaping gave up pretending and became just grass and a few overgrown hedges and a stone bench that nobody had bothered to make comfortable. Lily was asleep upstairs. Marcus had organized an afternoon rest period for the family, framing it as consideration for the older relatives, but really, Amara suspected, because he and Danny needed 2 hours alone after 24 hours of being publicly married. She had come to the garden because she needed to be outside and she needed to not be seen, and those 2 requirements had narrowed the options considerably. She heard him before she saw him. The particular cadence of his walk, she had not remembered consciously remembering it, but the moment she heard it on the stone path, her body recognized it before her mind did. Her shoulders went up, her jaw set. She did not stand. She stayed on the bench and let him come to her and stopped herself from looking up until he was close enough that looking away would have been its own kind of statement. He stopped 6 feet from her. He looked like he hadn't sat down since she left his room. His shirt was still pushed to the elbows, his hair slightly wrong, the controlled architecture of him showing its stress points. "I owe you the rest," he said. "You owe me a lot of things. The rest of the truth. The part I hadn't gotten to yet in my sequence." He said the word without irony, without softness. Just said it the way she'd said it, because she'd been right and he knew it, and pretending otherwise would cost more than he had. "Can I sit?" She moved over on the bench by 2 inches. It was not generosity. It was the minimum. He sat. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands loosely linked, and looked at the middle distance in the way of a man assembling something he has taken apart too many times. "The marriage," he said. "Everything I told you about it was true. It was arranged. It was nominal. She was a good person in a situation she didn't choose, and I tried to make it decent." He paused. "What I didn't tell you was that in the 18th month of it, I tried to find you." She looked at him. "What?" "I had a man I trusted run a search. I wanted to know you were safe, that you'd moved on, that your life was intact." He pressed his thumb hard into his opposite palm, a pressure point she recognized from the old days when he was trying to keep himself from showing something. "He found you. He found you in a hospital record." He stopped. Lily's birth record. The garden was very still. "You knew," she said. And the word came out wrong. Not a question, not an accusation, just the sound of the ground shifting. "You knew about Lily 18 months into your marriage?" "I saw her name. Your name, the date." He turned to look at her directly. "I did the math." Amara stood up. It was not a decision. It was physics, a body refusing to remain seated while containing what was now moving through it. She walked 4 steps away from the bench and stood with her back to him, and her hands were pressing against each other in front of her, and she was doing the breathing, the deliberate breathing, because the alternative was something she had not done in front of another person since the night she brought Lily home from the hospital. "You knew for 4.5 years, she said. "Yes." "You have known for 4.5 years that Lily existed." "Yes." She turned around. Her face was doing something she had no control over, and she was past caring. "You told me 14 months. You sat on that terrace last night, and you told me you found out 14 months ago. The photograph was 14 months ago." His voice was steady, in the way of a man who has decided that steadiness is the only thing he can offer and is offering it completely. I knew from the birth record that a child existed, that there was a child with your name on a birth record, and the math worked. But I didn't let myself confirm it. I buried it. I had a man I trusted destroy the records of the search, and He stopped. I told myself it was better not to know, that knowing and being unable to do anything was worse than not knowing. You told yourself. The words came out with a precision that was worse than volume. For 4.5 years, you told yourself it was better not to know. I was still inside the organization. My father was still this. I don't care about your father right now. Her voice cracked on the last word. She pressed her hand against her mouth. Put it down. Do you understand what you're telling me? You knew. For 4.5 years, you knew there was a child, and you buried it while I was... She stopped. The thing in her chest was too large for a sentence. Lily had her first day of school 8 months ago. I took 17 photographs because I couldn't stop. I stood at the gate and watched her walk in, and I was alone, and I was so... She stopped again. You could have known. You chose not to know. For 4.5 years, you chose not to know her. Yes, he said. There was nothing else to say, and he didn't try to fill the space with anything else. The garden sat in its late afternoon quiet. Somewhere beyond the hedge, a bird was doing something repetitive and indifferent. The light was going amber, the way light does in the hour before it starts to fail. Why are you telling me this now? She asked. The man at the cafe didn't know about this. This isn't why he called me. No. So you're volunteering this? Yes. Why? He stood up from the bench. He was taller than she forgot when she had the distance of a room between them, and closer now, and she did not step back. Because you asked me last night if I'd told you the whole truth, and I said yes. And that was the moment I should have told you all of it, and I didn't. And then this morning you came back from wherever you went with your face looking the way it looked, and I knew someone had told you about Seo Yan, and I knew I'd missed the window. He paused. So I'm not missing the next one. There is no next window, Cashin. Her voice was quiet, quieter than anger, which is the most dangerous register. There is no sequence anymore. There is no more careful ordering of revelations to manage my response. Do you understand that? Every version of the story where you control when I know what, that version is over. I know. Then why does it keep happening? Why am I standing here finding out another thing you knew that I didn't? Because I'm afraid of you, he said. She stopped. He said it the way people say things they've never said aloud, with the specific rawness of a first time, no practiced edges. Not afraid of... I'm afraid of what you decide. I'm afraid of standing in front of you with every piece of the truth visible and watching you close the door and knowing it's the right call and being unable to stop it from destroying me. He took one step toward her. I have been terrified since the moment I walked into that wedding yesterday. Every edited version, every sequence, everything I held back. It was fear. I know that doesn't make it acceptable. I know it makes it worse in some ways. But you asked why, and that's why. She looked at him. She was so tired. That was the thing nobody told you about sustained fury. It was exhausting in a way that nothing else was, because it required constant maintenance, constant restoking, and her body was starting to submit a complaint about the cost of it. Tell me the rest, she said. There isn't more. There is always more, Cashin. There has been more every time I thought we were finished. Tell me the rest. He looked at her steadily. The velvet box, he said. The real one. Not the flower, and the documents. She waited. 6 months ago, when I knew I was coming back. When the organization was dismantled, and my father was gone, and there was nothing left that could reach you. I had something made. I've been carrying it since. His hand went to his jacket pocket. I was going to wait. I was going to let things develop. I was going to be patient and earn the right, and then present it at some moment that felt like the right moment. He stopped. But there is no right moment. There is only right now, when you know the worst of me and you haven't left yet. He produced the box. It was smaller than the first one. Dark blue velvet, worn slightly at the corners from 6 months in a jacket pocket. He held it out. He did not open it. I'm not proposing, he said. I want to be clear about that. This is not a proposal. You are nowhere near ready for that, and neither am I. He paused. It's a promise ring. It was my mother's before my father got his hands on everything she owned. I recovered it 8 months ago. It's the only thing I've ever had that didn't come from him. He turned the box slightly in his fingers. I had it sized. I don't know how I knew the size. I had it sized, and I've been carrying it, and I'm not asking you to wear it. I'm asking you to hold it as something real, as something that was my mother's and now should be yours, regardless of what you decide about me. Amara looked at the box. Her chest was a complex and terrible instrument right now. You are trying to make this harder for me, she said. I'm trying to stop editing. His voice was rough. I'm trying to give you every real thing I have, in whatever order they come, without calculating what it does to my odds. He held the box steady. I'm terrified. I told you that. I'm terrified, and I'm giving you the ring anyway because my mother would have wanted it with someone who deserved it. And whatever else is true, you are the person who deserved it. She reached out. She took the box. She didn't open it. She held it in both hands the way you hold something you're not sure about, carefully, with awareness of its weight. 4.5 years, she said. Yes. You need to understand what that means. Lily learned to walk. She said her first word. It was more. Apo. She said it at the table reaching for blueberries, and I laughed so hard I cried. She had a phase where she was terrified of the drain in the bathtub, and I sat on the bathroom floor for 20 minutes every night for 3 months, talking her through it. Her voice was even. The evenness was the hardest part. She got sick the winter she was 3. Bad enough that I thought the fever was very high, and I was alone in the emergency room, and I was so scared I was talking to her even though she was unconscious, because I needed to hear my own voice telling her she was fine. She looked at him. You could have known about all of it. You chose not to. Yes, he said it without flinching, and I will spend the rest of my life with that. It's not your life I'm concerned about. I know. It's hers. She pressed the box against her sternum. It's Lily's life where that absence lives. Not yours. Not mine. Hers. And she doesn't even know there's an absence. She's 6 and she's whole, and she built herself without the missing piece because she didn't know the piece was missing. She stopped. If I let you in, and she finds out what you knew and when she's old enough to understand the math, she will do exactly what I'm doing right now. She will stand in front of you, and she will understand that you knew and you chose not to know her. And I need you to know that that moment is coming regardless of anything I decide today. You will have to stand in front of your daughter and answer for 4.5 years, and I cannot protect you from that. I'm not asking you to protect me from it. Good, because I wouldn't. He nodded. I know. Stop. She stepped toward him, closer than she'd let herself get since the terrace. Stop saying I know every time I say something true and painful. It sounds like agreement, and I need to know if it is. Do you actually know? Can you actually sit in the specific reality of what I'm describing, not as a concept, not as something you'll deal with in the future, but right now, in this garden, can you hold what you did without making it smaller? He looked at her, and she watched something happen in his face that she had never seen in the 2 years she'd known him before. Not composure, not the controlled management of presentation. Something underneath all of that, something that had been under it the whole time, coming up because there was nothing left to hide it with. No, he said, I can't hold it without making it smaller. I've been making it smaller for years because the full size of it, what it actually costs, what she lost, what you went through, the actual size of it is not something I can stand in front of without. He stopped. His jaw was tight. His eyes were doing the wet thing again. I have been a coward about this. Not just when I left, not just when I buried the birth record, not just when I edited the timeline. I have been a coward about the full cost of every choice I made, because the full cost is... He stopped again. His breath was ragged at the edges. She learned to walk, and I could have known, and I chose not to, and that is not something I can hold at full size and still function. So yes, I've been making it smaller, and no, I don't know how to stop. She looked at him. A man coming apart in a hotel garden at 4 PM was not what she had prepared for. She had prepared for charm, for strategy, for the careful deployment of sincerity as a tool. She had prepared for a man who was good at this. She had not prepared for a man who was falling apart in front of her in the specific, graceless, uncurated way of someone who has run out of performance. She was so tired. Cassian. Her voice came out different. She didn't know what to call the difference. Softer was wrong, quieter, more direct. Look at me. He looked at her. His eyes were wet, and he was not crying in the clean, photogenic way of people in films. His face was doing the ugly, effortful thing of a person trying not to cry and losing the argument with themselves in real time. "I am not going to forgive you today," she said. "I want that to be completely clear. What you've told me in the last 30 minutes, the 4.5 years, the burial, the choice, I'm not in a position to forgive that today, and I may never be in a position to forgive it completely. You need to know that before anything else." He nodded. One nod. Small. "But I also need to say something, and I need you to hear it without using it as permission for anything." She shifted the velvet box in her hands. "Lily asked for you this morning, before I went to the cafe. She woke up, and the first thing she said was, 'Is the man with the nice shoes eating breakfast with us?' And I told her I didn't know, and she said, 'I hope so. He seemed sad, and sad people should eat breakfast with others.'" She paused. "She's 6 years old, and she already knows more about kindness than—" She stopped. "She wants to know you. She doesn't know why, she doesn't know who you are, but she is already moving toward you the way she moves toward things she's decided matter." His breath went unsteady. "That is not your reward," she said immediately. "That is not forgiveness, and it is not permission, and it is not me telling you that what you did is balanced by something she said. It's me telling you the truth because you asked for all of it." "I know," he caught himself. "I understand." "If you hurt her," she said, "if you're in her life and then you're not, for any reason, under any circumstances, with any justification about safety or timing or protection, I will not be the one who suffers most. She will, and I will hold you responsible for that with everything I have." Yes, that means legally, that means personally. That means every resource I have spent 7 years building, I will bring to bear on making sure she is never collateral damage to your choices again. "Yes," his voice was wrecked. "I understand all of that." "Then I need you to answer one question, and I need the answer to be true, even if it's not the one that helps you." She held his gaze. "If everything went wrong, if I said no, if you never got the access you're asking for, if Lily grew up never knowing your name, could you accept that? Not be okay with it. Accept it." The silence was long. She watched him. She watched him sit in the question the way you sit in something that is actually being felt and not just processed. She watched the answer move across his face before he had it in language. "No," he said. "I could not accept it. I would spend the rest of my life with it, but I could not accept it. I'm not going to tell you I could because you asked for true." He breathed. "She exists. She is real. She is walking around in the world with my eyes, and she learned to walk, and she said her first word reaching for blueberries, and she is afraid of drains, and I will never be able to make those things not matter to me. I can stay away from her if that's what you require, but I cannot accept it." Amara looked at him for a long moment. Then she opened the velvet box. The ring was simple, a thin gold band with a single dark stone that caught the amber afternoon light and held it. It was old. She could see the oldness of it, the slight irregularities of something made by hand before machines made everything identical. It was the kind of object that had lived in drawers and pockets and held hands and absorbed the warmth of whoever was closest. She closed the box. "I'm going to talk to Marcus," she said. "Tonight. I'm going to tell him everything." He nodded. "And then tomorrow, when the wedding weekend is over and everyone goes home, I'm going to sit with this." She held up the box. "Not the ring. Everything. The whole thing. I'm going to sit with it without you in the room and without a clock on it." "Okay. And when I'm ready, if I'm ready, I'll call you." He went very still. If. She held his gaze. "That's what I have. That's all I have." He nodded. She turned to leave. She had taken 4 steps back toward the hotel when she heard him say her name. Not loud, just her name. in the voice that still did the thing it did. She stopped. She didn't turn around. "I stood outside your door for 11 minutes, he said, "and then I walked away. And I have walked away from every version of that door every day since. I'm done walking away." She heard him breathe. "I know I don't have the right to say that. I know what it costs you to hear it, and I'm sorry for the cost. But I needed you to know that there isn't a version of this where I choose to leave again. Whatever you decide, I'm not walking away from the result." She stood with her back to him. The amber light was moving on the hedges. Somewhere above them, in a room on the 7th floor, a 6-year-old was sleeping with one arm flung out. "Cassian," she said, without turning. "Yes?" "You've missed 4.5 years of her being alive in the world." Her voice was quiet and complete, and every word landed where she placed it. "You don't get to be done walking away until I say you're allowed to stop. Do you understand that?" A pause. "Yes," he said. "Good." She walked back to the hotel. She did not run. She did not look back. She walked at the same pace she always walked, measured, straight-spined, the pace of a woman who has learned that the most powerful thing you can do in a moment of extreme pressure is to appear as though you are not experiencing pressure at all. Her hand around the velvet box was shaking. She let it shake. Inside the hotel lobby, she passed a mirror and caught her own reflection and did not stop to look at it because she already knew what she'd see. A woman who was holding more than she'd agreed to hold and was holding it anyway. The way she had been holding things for 7 years. The way she would keep holding things because that was who she was, and who she had made herself, and also, occasionally, the thing that made her so tired she could feel it behind her eyes. She took the elevator to the 7th floor. She stood in the hallway outside her room. She opened the velvet box one more time. The ring sat in the dim light of a hotel corridor and caught nothing and gave nothing back. She closed it. She put it in her bag. She went inside, and Lily was awake, had apparently staged a full recovery from the nap, and was building something architectural from the extra pillows, narrating the construction to no one, and looked up when Amara came in with the expression of a person who has been waiting and is pleased the wait is over. "Mama," she said, "can we have dinner with the sad shoe man?" Amara stood in the doorway of her own hotel room. Her daughter was looking at her with the clear, direct eyes that had been looking at her for 6 years, the ones that had come from somewhere else and landed in this specific face and were asking a specific question with the 6-year-old's perfect, devastating simplicity. And Amara opened her mouth to say something careful and considered and honest and age-appropriate. And what she said instead was the thing that was true before she could stop it from being true, before the lawyer brain could intercept it and draft something safer. "I don't know yet, baby," she said, "but maybe." Lily accepted this with the pragmatic equanimity of a child who has learned that maybe from her mother is meaningfully different from maybe from everyone else. She went back to her pillow architecture. Amara sat on the edge of the bed. She pressed both hands over her face. And in the garden, 4 floors below, Cassian Voss stood in the amber light with the space where she had been, and the choice she had left him with, and the full-size weight of everything he had made smaller for years settling onto him in a hotel garden in a way he could not walk away from and could not make smaller anymore. And he stood in it, and his face did the ugly, effortful thing without anyone there to see it, and he stood there for a long time. And neither of them knew, in that moment, whether the door between them was closing or holding. But the box was in her bag, and she had not given it back. She talked to Marcus that night. She waited until Lily was asleep, properly asleep, the heavy unconscious kind that takes 20 minutes to arrive after a day of full-body enthusiasm. And then she texted her brother a single word, Terrace. He was there in 4 minutes, still in the clothes he'd worn at dinner, his tie gone, and his collar open and his face wearing the expression he'd had since yesterday afternoon, the one that said he was holding a question he hadn't been given permission to ask yet. She told him everything, not the managed version, not the lawyer-edited summary with the inflammatory details softened, everything. From the beginning, how they had met, what the 2 years had been, the night he left, the pregnancy, the years after, the birth record, the 14 months, the marriage, the 4.5 years of knowing and choosing not to know. Marcus listened without interrupting, which was not his nature and cost him something visible. When she finished, the terrace was quiet. The wedding lights were still strung above them, but most of the staff had gone, and the effect was of a party that had ended and left its decorations behind. Marcus said, "How long have you been carrying this?" 7 years. Alone. Yes. He pressed his hands flat on the railing and looked out at the dark grounds. His jaw was working. She watched her brother, this man she had grown up beside and fought with and loved with the unsentimental constancy of siblings who have survived difficult things together. She watched him absorb what she had put in front of him and process it in the particular way he processed things, which was to go very still and then very deliberate. "He's my friend," Marcus said. "I know. And he's been my friend for 4 years, and the entire time he's known—" "Yes." He turned to look at her. "Are you okay?" "No." "Are you going to be?" She looked at him. "I don't know yet." He pulled her into a hug then, the kind that is not gentle or performative but just structural. His arms around her the way arms are when the point is to hold something together rather than to express something. She stood in it for a moment. She was so tired that the hug felt like sitting down. "He's a complicated man," Marcus said into the top of her head. "That's diplomatic. I'm trying to be your brother and his friend at the same time, and it's very uncomfortable. You don't have to be his friend right now." "I know." He pulled back, looked at her. "What do you need?" She thought about it. The real question, not the reflexive one. "I need you to not involve yourself," she said. "I need this to be between him and me, and I need to make the decision without anyone's hand on the scale, including yours. Even if I think, especially if you think." She looked at him steadily. "This is about Lily, which means it's mine to decide." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded, the nod of a man who disagrees but respects the principle. "Okay. Thank you for the wedding," she said. "It was a good day. Before all of this, it was a genuinely good day." He laughed, short and surprised. "High bar you're setting." "I mean it." "I know you do." He kissed her forehead. "Call me tomorrow." "I will." He went inside. She stood on the terrace alone for another few minutes, looking at the empty grounds, the dark grass, the lights of the hotel reflected in the small ornamental pond near the hedge. Then she went to bed. She slept this time. Not well, and not long, but she slept. 3 weeks passed. She went back to the city, back to the firm, back to the apartment, back to the school run and the grocery store and the specific rhythm of a life she had built with considerable effort and maintained with considerable discipline. Lily went back to first grade and reported daily on its developments with the thoroughness of an embedded journalist. Amara worked on a commercial dispute that required 18-hour days for the first 10 of those 3 weeks, and the work was a mercy, the way demanding work sometimes is. It left no room for anything else to live in. Cassian did not call. He had said he would wait. He was waiting. She knew this because on the 14th day she found herself looking at her phone with a feeling she refused to name for 2 more days before she admitted it was something close to waiting for him to break his word, and he was not breaking it, and she did not know what to do with the fact that he was not breaking it. On the 22nd day she drove to the address he had given her. She did it on a Saturday morning while Lily was at her friend Cassie's house for a birthday party that would last 4 hours. She did it without telling anyone, without deciding in advance that she was going to do it. She was simply in the car, and then on the highway, and then on a smaller road that ran along the coast, and then in front of a house. It was a good house. That was the first thing, and she resented it for it. A single-story structure set back from the road, pale gray shingles and big windows facing the water, a porch with 2 chairs that were still in their delivery wrapping, a small yard that hadn't been touched yet, the grass slightly long. It looked like a house that had been purchased and not yet lived in, like a house that was waiting to find out what it was for. There was a car in the drive. She had not called ahead. She sat in her car for 3 minutes. Then she got out. She knocked. He opened the door and the expression on his face went through 3 things in approximately 1 second. Recognition, something that was not quite hope, but was hope adjacent, and then the deliberate settling of both into something careful, something that did not presume. He was in a gray t-shirt and old jeans. His feet were bare. He looked like a person who lived alone and had stopped performing even for himself. "Amara," he said, "can I come in?" He stepped back from the door. The inside of the house was sparsely furnished, a couch, a table, a kitchen that had been stocked with basic things, and no more. There were 3 boxes in the corner of the living room, still taped. On the kitchen counter, a single coffee cup. On the windowsill facing the ocean, nothing at all, just the light coming off the water. It was the house of a man who had not allowed himself to set anything down permanently, who had been waiting to find out if he was staying. She stood in the living room and looked at the taped boxes. "You haven't unpacked," she said. "Some things." He gestured toward the kitchen. "The essentials. Not the rest." "No." She turned to face him. "Why not?" He looked at her directly. "Because I didn't know if it was going to matter," he said. "Whether I made it a home or left it a storage unit seemed like a decision that required information I didn't have yet." She looked around the room. The afternoon light came in off the water in long, pale slabs. The room was very quiet, the specific quiet of a place near the ocean where the sound of water becomes the baseline and everything else is measured against it. "Lily's name is on the deed," she said. "Yes." "I had a lawyer look at it. It's clean, unconditional." She paused. "She won't understand what it means for years." "I know. When she does understand, she's going to have questions about why someone she didn't know gave her a house." "Yes. And those questions are going to require answers that are honest." "I know that too." She moved to the window. The ocean was doing what the ocean does regardless, gray-green and indifferent and continuous. She thought about the fact that she had driven 40 minutes to stand in a half-empty house and look at water with a man who had her daughter's eyes. And she thought about what that meant about the decision she had already made, the one she had been sitting with for 3 weeks and pretending she hadn't made yet. She turned around. "I need to tell you something," she said. "And I need you to listen to all of it before you say anything." He nodded. "What you did, the leaving, the marriage, the 4.5 years of knowing and choosing not to know, none of that is resolved. I want to be precise about that. I have not processed it into something manageable. I have not forgiven it. It lives in me as a specific, located hurt, and I don't know how long it's going to live there. And I can't tell you it won't affect how I look at you sometimes." She held his gaze. "That's not a warning, it's just the truth. You asked for all of it, so that's part of all of it." "Okay," he said. "I'm not doing this because you gave Lily a house. I'm not doing this because of the ring, or the flower, or the fact that you stood in a hotel garden and cried without trying to make it look better than it was. Those things are real, but they're not the reason." "What's the reason?" She was quiet for a moment. The water moved outside the window. "She asked me," Amar said, 3 days after the wedding, if the sad shoe man was going to come visit. I told her probably not. She said, 'That's too bad, Mama, because I think he needed somebody.'" She paused. "She's 6 years old and she looked at you for a total of maybe 40 minutes, and she decided you needed somebody." She looked at him. "I've been trying for 3 weeks to find the flaw in her read. I can't find it." He stood very still. "She's perceptive," he said, and his voice was rough at the edges. "She gets it from me," Amara said. And then, after a beat, "And probably from you." Something in his face broke open, not dramatically, not in the way of scenes in films where the music swells and the lighting shifts. Just quietly, the way a window opens in a room that's been closed too long, the way something sealed allows air in for the first time. He pressed his hand over his mouth and kept his eyes steady and held it together, and she watched him hold it together, and she let him. "I'm not giving you Lily," she said. "She's not mine to give and she's not yours to receive. What I'm saying is I'm going to introduce you as a friend of her uncle's who is going to be spending some time around us. We're going to do that slowly, and we're going to do it at her pace, and the day you tell her the truth about who you are is a day I decide and you agree to, not the other way around. Yes, you're going to show up. Every time you say you will, you will. If something happens, a genuine emergency, a real reason, you call me first. You don't cancel on her. You find a way to still be present even when the form has to change. Yes, and you're going to be honest with me, not in sequences, not in managed revelations. If there is something I should know, you tell me when you know it, not when it's strategically optimal." She held his gaze. "I don't care how bad it is. I have survived worse than honesty." "Yes." He said it with more weight this time. All 3 of the previous times had been compliance. This one was different. This one was a vow. "There's one more thing," she said. She reached into her bag. She put the velvet box on the kitchen counter between them. He looked at it. He didn't reach for it. I'm not wearing it yet, she said. I don't know when yet. Maybe a long time from now. Maybe a different context entirely. Maybe a different kind of promise when we've rebuilt enough to make that promise mean something real. She looked at the box and then at him. But I'm not giving it back. I want you to know that. I looked at it for 3 weeks and I could not make myself give it back, and that's information. He looked at the box. My mother, he said slowly, would have liked you. She would have liked the way you fight for things. Tell me about her sometime. He looked up. I will. She picked up her bag. She was going to leave. She needed to leave. Needed to get back before the party ended. Needed the drive and the movement and the sense of returning to her own life from a safe distance. She was at the front door when she stopped. The boxes, she said without turning around. Yes. Unpack them. A pause. Okay, he said. She left. The first visit was 4 Saturdays later. She told Lily they were going to see a house near the ocean that belonged to a friend of Marcus's, and that his name was Cassian, and that he had very shiny shoes, and Lily's face did the thing where recognition arrived before she'd assembled the language for it. The sad shoe man, she said. He's not sad anymore, Amara said. And then, because she had committed to honesty as a foundational principle, or maybe he's still a little sad, but he's working on it. Lily considered this. Okay, she said. Does he have a dog? I don't think so. He should get a dog. Dogs help with sad. I'll pass that along. The drive took 40 minutes. Lily spent it asking questions about the ocean and about whether houses near water got extra wet inside during storms. And Amara answered and drove and kept both hands on the wheel, and her chest was doing the complex thing it had been doing for 4 weeks now. Not resolved, not comfortable, but occupied with something that was not only pain. Cassian was on the porch when they pulled up. He had unpacked the chairs. Both of them, side by side, no longer in their wrapping. He was standing near them rather than sitting, because sitting would have looked too casual and standing was more honest about what this was. A man waiting, with the full knowledge of what waiting cost and what it meant, and what he was asking to be trusted with. He was wearing good shoes. Lily got out of the car before Amara had finished parking it. The particular physics of a 6-year-old in motion taking over, and she walked up the porch steps with the direct confidence she applied to everything, stopped in front of Cassian, and looked up at him. He crouched down to her level. Amara watched from the foot of the steps. You came, Lily said. You invited me to breakfast, Cassian said. At the wedding, I was late. I'm sorry. Lily considered this with the gravity she applied to matters of social obligation. It's okay, she said. My mom says late is better than never as long as you have a real reason. I had a real reason, he said. It took me a while to get it sorted. That happens, said Lily. She looked at him with her dark, heavy-lidded eyes, his eyes, in a smaller face. And she said, with the absolute guileless certainty of a child stating a self-evident fact, You look like someone I was supposed to meet. The words landed in the afternoon air and stayed there. Cassian's jaw moved. He held the expression together with visible effort, and then stopped trying to hold it and let it do what it was going to do. And what it did was break open in the same quiet way as before, the same window opening, except this time the air that came in was different because this time it was her standing in front of him. Yeah, he said, and his voice was barely functional. I think I was supposed to meet you too. Cool, said Lily. And then, do you have a dog? He laughed. It was not a composed sound. It was the laugh of a man who has been holding something very heavy for a very long time and has just unexpectedly been allowed to set it down. No, he said. Should I? Yes, Lily said with absolute authority. A medium one. Not too small because then they're nervous, and not too big because then they knock things over. She paused. Mama says I can't have one in the apartment, but you have a yard. I do have a yard. It needs work, Lily said, looking at it critically. The grass is too long. I know. I've been busy. We could help, Lily said, and then, with the particular casualness of a child who makes large decisions the way other people breathe. Me and Mama, if she says yes. She turned and looked back at Amara on the steps. Amara stood in the afternoon light with the ocean doing its continuous thing beyond the house, and her daughter's face turned toward her, and this man crouched on his own porch looking at her over Lily's head, with an expression that contained more than any single expression should be asked to hold. She thought about a kitchen table at 3 in the morning. She thought about a parking lot where she'd cried alone because there was no one to call. She thought about the scar on her wrist from a car accident on a winter night, and the way the hospital had asked for an emergency contact, and she'd listed her brother's name, and then sat in the waiting room trying not to feel the specific shape of having only one name to list. She thought about a pressed flower she had thrown away and a ring she had not given back. She thought about a woman who had rebuilt everything from nothing and was still standing, which was not a small thing, which was in fact the whole thing, the entire foundation on which anything else would have to be built. "Sure," she said, "we can help with the yard." Lily turned back to Cassian with the satisfaction of someone whose proposal has passed the necessary vote. "Okay," she said, "do you have a lawnmower?" "Somewhere," he said, "in one of the boxes I unpacked." "Good." She extended her hand with the formal solemnity of a person conducting a business arrangement. "I'm Lily." He took her hand. His was large against hers. He shook it with the seriousness she was offering. "I'm Cassian," he said. "I know," she said. "My mom told me." She let go of his hand and looked at the yard. "We should start on the left side. That's always where the worst part is." She went down the porch steps and into the yard and began assessing the situation with the focus she applied to all logistical challenges. Cassian stood slowly from his crouch. He turned to look at Amara. She climbed the last 2 steps onto the porch. They stood side by side looking at their daughter in the too long grass. The quiet between them was different from any quiet that had existed between them in the past 3 days, the past 3 weeks, the past 7 years. It was not the quiet of things unsaid. It was the quiet of 2 people who have said the hard things and are now, simply, in the same place at the same time, watching the same small person stride through the same overgrown yard with the same complete confidence that the problem is manageable and the work is worth doing. "She's going to organize us," Cassian said. "She organizes everything," Amara said. "She gets that from you." "Probably." A pause. "Maybe from you too. I don't know you well enough yet to say." The word "yet" arrived in the afternoon air between them, and neither of them remarked on it, and both of them heard it. "The lawnmower is in the garage," he said. "I think." "You think?" "I unpacked it. I'm less certain where I put it after that." "That's going to be a problem for Lily." "I'm aware." Lily turned from the yard and called, "Are you coming?" Amara looked at Cassian. He looked at her. Not the look from the wedding, not the look from the terrace or the hotel room or the garden, not any of the looks that had been carrying the weight of history. This one was smaller and more ordinary, and for that reason more real, the look of 2 people who have agreed, without making a ceremony of it, to try. "Coming?" Amara called back. She went down the steps. After a moment, he followed, and the 3 of them, a woman who had rebuilt herself from wreckage and was still standing, a man who had spent 7 years learning the cost of silence and was only now beginning to pay it down, and a 6-year-old who had decided, with the clear-eyed certainty of someone who had not yet learned to talk herself out of things, that this was a person who needed somebody, stood in the too long grass of an unmade yard in the afternoon light beside the ocean, and figured out where the lawnmower was and started on the left side, because that was always where the worst part was, and the worst part was where you had to begin. The scars did not disappear. They don't in real life. They don't in any life that has been actually lived, where the choices were actual choices and the costs were actual costs, and the people involved were people with weight and history and the specific damage that comes from loving things in a world that does not guarantee the things you love will stay. But scars are not the same as wounds. Wounds are open. Wounds take your attention. Wounds demand to be the thing you organize your life around. Scars are different. Scars are closed. Scars are the body's own evidence that it survived, that it repaired, that it did the slow, invisible work of making something that could hold together under pressure, where before there was only the raw fact of being broken. Amara Vale had scars. She was not unbroken. She had never been unbroken, not since the morning she woke up and understood that the person she'd trusted with the unguarded version of herself had walked out without a word. She had simply built anyway. She had built on and around and through the damage, the way cities build on fault lines because the ground is there and the life has to go somewhere. She was not forgiving him today. She was not forgetting anything. She was standing in a yard that needed work, next to a man who had a great deal left to prove and knew it, watching her daughter explain the correct technique for assessing overgrown grass to someone who was listening with the focused attention of a person who understands that this is not about the grass. That was what was true today. Tomorrow would have its own true things. And Cassian Voss, who had spent 7 years on the outside of everything he had walked away from, who had learned in the most expensive possible way that distance is not the same as protection and silence is not the same as safety, stood in the afternoon light and pushed a lawnmower in a direction his daughter indicated, and listened to her revise the plan twice, and did not argue with the revisions, and felt the specific weight of something settling into place that had been suspended too long. Not completion, not resolution in the clean sense that films manufacture and life refuses to supply. Just beginning. The specific and unremarkable beginning of a thing that had been delayed by fear and bad choices and a years-long confusion between protecting people and simply leaving them, and was only now, in a yard on a Saturday afternoon, getting around to starting. The ocean continued past the fence line. The grass came down in strips. Lily supervised. Amara watched and worked and sometimes caught him looking at their daughter with the expression of a man counting things he had missed and things he was still in time for. And sometimes he caught her watching him, and the look that passed between them in those moments was not love, not yet, not in any form that either of them would use that word for yet, but it was the material that love is made of, which is the harder thing, which is the thing that requires more and lasts longer and cannot be performed. The afternoon moved west. The yard got smaller, and in the slow, ordinary work of it, the lawnmower's noise and Lily's commentary and the smell of cut grass and the light going golden the way it does at that hour. Something that had been suspended for 7 years, something that had been waiting in the specific patient way that true things wait, finally, quietly, without announcement, came down to earth.